You know, there's a good chance you love shrimp. I mean, it's one of the most popular kinds of seafood on the entire planet. But what if I told you there's a secret accomplice, a tiny freeloader involved in a crime that's quietly crippling the industry from the inside out? Well, today, we're going to unmask this microscopic menace that's stunting shrimp growth all over the world.
So what is this invisible freeloader? What's the culprit that's holding back shrimp growth and costing the aquaculture industry literally hundreds of millions of dollars? It's a real mystery, and one that actually affects the food that ends up on your plate. So naturally, scientists have been hunting for clues.
So let's start our investigation by taking a closer look at this silent shrimp threat.
All right, so the culprit actually has a name. It's a mouthful. Enterocytozoon hepatopenaei. We'll just call it EHP for short. Now, EHP isn't your typical parasite that just kills its host. No, it's way sneakier than that. It's this tiny parasitic fungus that gets into the shrimp's digestive system, and instead of causing these big, obvious die-offs, it just stops them from growing. It's basically a thief, stealing nutrients and growth potential, which makes it incredibly hard to spot until it's way too late.
And the cost of this microscopic theft? It's just staggering. In the regions that are affected, this one tiny parasite is responsible for up to $567 million in economic losses. And that's not a one-time thing. That's every single year. That is a massive, massive hit to farmers and really to the global food supply.
Okay, but how is this parasite getting around so effectively? That's the big question, and it leads us right into the next phase of our investigation, the search for hidden carriers.
You see, scientists already knew that EHP could spread through the water. But that didn't explain everything. The parasites seemed to just hang around in the environment and then pop up again in supposedly clean shrimp ponds. So the question became, is something else out there helping it travel? Is something giving it a place to hide and survive out in the open?
And this, right here, is where the plot really thickens. The prime suspects turned out to be the shrimp's own neighbors. We're talking about these filter-feeding shellfish, things like Pacific oysters, bay scallops, Mediterranean mussels, and Manila clams. They all share the same coastal waters, and their whole life is spent filtering huge volumes of water, making them the perfect potential hiding spots for our little microscopic villain.
So, with a list of suspects in hand, the scientific detectives took their investigation out of the lab and into the field. Let's dig into their coastal investigation.
So how do you actually go about proving something like this? Well, their plan was super meticulous. Step 1, they went out and collected samples of all 4 of those suspect species from major aquaculture hotspots in Korea. Step 2, they carefully extracted DNA from the parts of the shellfish most likely to trap a parasite. We're talking the gills and the digestive organs. And finally, step 3, they ran these highly sensitive molecular tests, you might have heard of them, PCR tests, to hunt for EHP's unique genetic fingerprint.
And the results? Wow, they were a huge breakthrough. The sheer number of positive hits was shocking. EHP's DNA was found in all 4 of the suspect species. And just look at these detection rates. For some of the shellfish, over 70% of them tested positive. This was the first major clue that these bivalves were definitely involved, likely acting as these living, breathing reservoirs for the parasite out in the environment.
But look, finding DNA is a really strong lead, but it's not the same as a conviction. The team needed to see the crime actually happening. It was time to put the evidence under the microscope.
So to get that definitive, undeniable proof, the scientists brought one of their key suspects, the Manila clam, into the lab for a much more controlled experiment. What they needed to see was whether the parasite could physically invade the clam's body.
And here it is. This is the smoking gun. What you're looking at is a microscopic image of a clam's intestinal tissue after it was exposed to EHP. And those little purple dots? Those are the EHP spores. And get this, after just 24 hours, they weren't just passing through, oh no, they were actively invading the clam's tissue. This was it, irrefutable proof.
But there was still one final test left. Could an infected clam actually pass the parasite on to a healthy shrimp? The experiment was simple, but really powerful. They took one group of healthy shrimp and fed them tissue from those EHP-exposed clams. Then a control group got fed clean clam tissue. The result? Completely conclusive. The shrimp that ate the exposed clam tissue got infected. Case closed. The clams were, without a doubt, accomplices.
So, what does this all mean for the people on the front lines, the shrimp farmers? Well, this huge discovery has led to a pretty urgent warning for the entire aquaculture industry.
The scientific term for the role these shellfish are playing is called a mechanical carrier. So what does that mean? It means the organism, in this case the clam or the oyster, it picks up a pathogen and just physically transfers it to another host, all without getting sick itself. They're essentially unwitting accomplices, like a taxi service for the parasite.
And this leads to some really critical takeaways for shrimp farmers. It is now crystal clear that local shellfish populations can act as a persistent source of EHP in the coastal environment. So if shrimp farms are sharing seawater systems with areas where these shellfish live, they're basically creating a perfect superhighway for reinfection. The recommendations are pretty clear. Farmers now have to monitor their local shellfish populations, and they've got to invest in biosecurity measures like water treatment to break this cycle of transmission for good.
And all of this leaves us with one final, kind of sobering thought. This investigation unmasked one hidden accomplice. It really makes you wonder, right? If common shellfish can be hidden carriers for this one parasite, what other microscopic threats are just lurking out there in our shared coastal waters, just waiting for their moment?